Hi there, welcome back to Horological. In this video I'm going to talk about my Seiko SKX009 and why I now own an SRPD53 aka the 5KX. Stay till the end to find out about a key difference between these watches that no one talks about. Don't get caught out like I did. Before I forget, a quick wrist check. I'm wearing today my Laco Augsburg 42mm Flieger watch, a fantastic legible pilot's watch. So, the Seiko SKX, from the moment I noticed this watch in my local jeweller's window, I was mesmerised with the aluminium bezel. The fact that it was a self-winding mechanism with an amazing looking Jubilee style bracelet in 1996, this was a cutting edge entry level dive watch, to me anyway, and £174, round about at the time $271, nearly a month's wage from my part-time hospitality job. A sizeable investment for me, with my only other big purchase that year being a Hitachi 3D superwoofer stereo. The dimensions and the specs of the SKX are: the case diameter is 42.5mm, the thickness is 13.3mm, the lug width is 22. The lug to lug is 45.5mm on my calipers. The movement is a 21 Joule 7S26 workhorse movement. The crystal is Seiko's proprietary Hardlex mineral crystal, 200 metres of water resistance, and it's an ISO 6425 rated dive watch. The SKX, it can trace its roots back to the 1960s, with it being closely related to the Seiko 7002 dive watch. It also had a Pepsi bezel, Jubilee bracelet version 2 actually, which itself had infused DNA from the 6306, 6309 watches. It's a quality family tree indeed. With the SKX, Seiko had a real hit in their hands and created what would go on to be one of the most popular best-selling mechanical dive watches of all time. It's hard in this era of the smartwatch to imagine us ever witnessing anything like it ever again. The case is largely a highly polished finish with some directional brushing on the top. The dial it's a dark navy with printed indices, printed logos and text, with amazing levels of lume. Even given its budget price point, it was a standout for lume performance due to the proprietary Seiko Lume used, often beating out watches at many times the price point. The chapter ring, it's a steeply angled affair with a printed white minute track. The SKX had a fully graduated bezel with a sunken lume pip, and the watch fully complied with the ISO 6425 standard of the day. The case had a threaded screw-down crown, and it had a screw-down solid metal case back with the legendary embossed Seiko wave on it. It has a day date complication. To some collectors, it is really desirable to have the kanji Japanese text that differentiates a JDM watch. Those carry a price premium to this day on the secondary market. One of Seiko's quirks with this day date complication is Monday to Friday is black text, with Saturday being blue text and the Sunday being red text, and all on a white date peel background. The seconds hand, it's a reverse lollipop style, with the counterbalance portion being coated black. The minute hand, it's an arrowhead, and the hour hand is a syringe. It's a classic Seiko configuration. The 7S26 movement uses the Seiko Magic Lever bi-directional winding system. It has the DiaShock shock resistance system built in. It's a 3 Hz movement, meaning that it ticks at 6 times per second. This was a new, in 1996, entry-level movement that released with the SKX. It did not have hacking seconds or hand winding, and the power reserve was around about 41 hours. My own personal SKX was accurate to -8 and +10 seconds per day. There was a convergence in 1996 when Seiko released the 7S26 movement and the SKX at the same time, and they also had helped build and shape the actual ISO 6425 dive watch standards, and the SKX became kind of one of the best value entry points to having an ISO certified dive watch on your wrist. Time stood still for 22 years, where Seiko essentially had this market dominated. Then in 2018, ISO decided to update the 6425 dive watch standards, but a wee bit more than that later. I no longer have an SKX in my collection. My watch was lost during extended Millennium celebrations sometime between 1999 and 2000. I have had a huge nostalgia pang that started round about 2021, and it was round about then I decided I would enjoy having an SKX back in my collection again, and that's where my problems began. The SKX, it had been discontinued in 2019. I had assumed, a la Seiko, that new old stock would be available for years to come. Wrong. Absolutely wrong. They had become rare and hard to acquire in original condition. I had missed the boat. eBay was full of Frankenstein SKX that were commanding prices above $500. The swapping of date wheels to the more desirable Congi versions was a common thing to see, as were dial bezel swaps. The SKX was a popular modder's base watch, and getting a good OEM version, it was like playing the lottery. There were even some complete watches for sale that were made of all aftermarket parts. Seiko had never touched these watches. No genuine Seiko parts were in these watches at all. This market had more danger than an unscheduled landing on LV426. I did pull the trigger and ordered what looked like a good one. When it arrived, it was so poorly put together with random parts, some of which were not Seiko OEM parts. I sent it straight back for a refund. I did notice around this time the Seiko 5 Sports with the Pepsi bezel, which it had released in 2019. I also noticed these watches were roundly rejected by the community and reviewers alike. This caused me peak interest. The contrarian in me had to check one out. I went to Glasgow to get a look at one of these watches in the flesh and perhaps pick one up. Only a couple of the jewellers that I visited that day carried the 5 Sports line, instead favouring the higher kind of end prospects level turtle watches as the kind of entry point to their Seiko collections. The staff and the jewellers I visited, they couldn't understand why I was so interested in the Pepsi bezel SKX rather than a Pepsi bezeled paddy version of the Seiko Turtle, or numerous other offerings in the prospects lineup. Eventually I did manage to get my hands in one of the 5 Sports watches with the Pepsi bezel, but a la Seiko it was misaligned. Although I did decide with that misaligned watch in hand, I was going to try and find a good one of these SRPD53 watches, and I would be happy to add it to my collection, a modern day homage to my long lost SKX, if you like. I decided after a couple of other futile attempts to buy one of these watches fairly locally to contact the Seiko boutique in New Bond Street, London. They assured me they had a few in stock and could supply a well-aligned example for me to purchase. I decided rather than buy it online, I would instead travel to London in the train, which at the time it's 5 hours each way, to curate, not buy this watch. This was getting expensive. The staff were amazing, if perhaps a little bemused at my mission, but I can't rationally explain how it made me feel. As watch collectors, is it ever rational? I ended up buying a well-aligned one after having a few brought out to me on the classic felt tray. I also grabbed the official Seiko 22mm navy blue NATO strap, so £310 for the watch and £80 for the NATO strap. ouch. So $390 for the complete system, around about $500 equivalent, plus the price of those train tickets. Oh, maybe I should have tried harder to find a good SKX in the secondary market. I will also add that straight out the box, this watch had an ill-fitting rattly hollow end link bracelet, but I had noticed this in the boutique, so I knew what I was getting myself into, and that's why, while there, I picked up the NATO on the day. Not a huge deal, but it's worth a mention. So the dimensions of the SRPD53 are: the case diameter is 42.5mm, the thickness is 13.3mm, we've got a lug-to-lug of 45.5mm, a lug width of 22. The movement is 4R36. New workhorse movement. It's a 24 dual movement this time. It still has Seiko's proprietary Hardlex mineral crystal. Water resistance is reduced from the SKX 200 down to 100 metres. It has no screw down crown, and it's no longer an ISO certified dive watch. So dimension wise, the watch is identical to the SKX, with the omission of the screw down crown being one of the two case differences, but more about that other case difference later on. Seiko added hand winding and hacking seconds to this new movement and kept the 41-hour familiar power reserve. Magic lever, automatic winding, and the DiaShock system were still all present and correct. The solid metal case back with the much loved Seiko Wave had now been replaced with a Hardlex mineral crystal exhibition case back, which I actually quite like. The opportunity to do this was achieved with the watch having the reduced 100 metres water resistance, and someone buying their first automatic watch being able to see the movement, it sure is a desirable feature to have. Now, a lot of Seiko fans in the community, they feel aggrieved about the SRPD watches. 100 metres reduced from the SKX's 200 metres of water resistance, and also the loss of that aforementioned screw down crown. I don't mind these changes. The original Blancpain 50 fathoms was rated to 91.44 metres, aka 50 fathoms water resistance without a screw down crown. At the time, Rolex had the patent for screw down crowns, and I mean, even the original Rolex Submariner had 100 metres of water resistance. 99.9% of the people who were complaining about this water resistance change will never have been beyond recreational diving depth anyway. PADI, Professional Association of Dive Instructors, they recognise recreational diving depth to be no more than 40 metres. After those depths, exotic gas mixtures start to come into play. Most recreational diving, it's actually less than 20 metres. For me, as an argument for disliking a watch, it's a bit of a non-starter. Unless you're a genuine professional saturation diver, then fair play. For me, I was happy with what Seiko had kept in the new watch, and the overall maturing of the design language SRPD53 was using over the SKX009. It feels like a logical evolution given the whole picture, with the ISO 2018 update to provide additional kind of context for the decisions that Seiko were essentially forced to make. The aluminium bezel that first drew me to the SKX, it's still there, but it's updated. I actually like the SRPD53's less technical looking bezel. The colours are a little lighter and brighter on the SRPD53, with the red being almost candy-like, and the blue portion being a few shades lighter on the Pantone colour scale than the almost black in some lighting conditions SKX blue. The red portion of the bezel is still fully indexed, with the blue portion now being simplified to 5-minute interval markings only. One other change was the omission of the Lume pip. Instead, the SRPD53 has a non-lumed flat silver inverted triangle. I think the SRPD53 looks great. The hands are still the same, reverse lollipop second hand with the black coated counterbalance portion, a syringe hour hand with the arrow minute hand bringing welcome familiarity. The dial on the newer SRPD 53 is at this price point exceptional. It's got a subtle radiant blue sunburst effect. It has applied logos and indices. Seiko really put lots of effort into dialing, pun intended, the cosmetics of this watch up several notches from the original SKX. Timing wise, my SRPD53, it runs at +6 or -4 seconds per day. It runs between that, which is well within the manufacturer's tolerances of +45 and -35 seconds per day. Anybody who has ever owned a Subaru Impreza or Mitsubishi Lancer, of which I have owned both, they know how humble the Japanese can be about performance. They are the masters of managing expectations and then easily surpassing those expectations. I see that exact same nuance here with these Seiko watch movements, just the same as that Mitsubishi Lancer was rated at 300 brake horsepower but had a real world 330 on test. These watch movements nearly always come in between +10 and -10 seconds per day. With some regulation work, these movements can hold chronometer tolerances, especially after a couple of hundred hours of runtime and a few heat cycles just to get everything running smoothly. I note that as of 2025, many in the Seiko community have started softening their stance towards the 5KX model of watches. And, although some hardcore SKX fans still remain resolute, this is not a watch for them. Also of note is Seiko are now leaning more into the whole spirit of SKX thing. It's started appearing in their 2025 summer marketing materials, that the terms SKX, the name's been brought back, the Seiko website's been mentioning it. Good on you, Seiko. It only took 6 years. Seiko had been having it good with the SKX until ISO decided to update the 6425 dive watch certification in 2018. The test was to become more stringent with a 50-hour saturation test and an increase in the number of watches pulled from a batch that had to be tested to maintain certified status. The net result of all of this was added cost per unit to maintain the coveted certification. The SKX was a product that already had tight profit margins and an outdated movement. Towards the end of its production cycle, the SKX was literally creaking at the seams, although I did thoroughly read through the 2018 ISO 6425 revisions, and I've got no doubt that SKX would have passed, these updates, but it was purely economics. In no way would this watch have failed on technical terms. It was purely a failure on financial sustainability terms. I actually prefer my SRPD53 to my original SKX. Yes, I enjoy wearing it more than my original SKX. It is just such a more wearable daily watch with the inclusion of hand winding. From a crown, it doesn't require being unscrewed to operate. Anyone who wears watches on a rotation basis knows what a pain it can be to unscrew the crown, to set the time for that watch, to give it some wrist time. I do enjoy the cosmetic changes Seiko have made too. The dial encompasses all the feels of the original, with those elongated syringe tip circles at 6 and 9, the inverted syringe tip triangle at 12. It really has the face of an icon, and in direct sunlight that radial sunburst blue just comes to life. What an effect. I am so happy Seiko kept this watch available to buy in an albeit to some compromised form. But to me, it's a perfect nostalgia piece. and it sits proudly in my top watch box. The one major change I have made to my SRPD53 since that initial purchase is I now wear it on a tapered Jubilee style bracelet like I had on my original SKX. I also added an aftermarket glide lock style clasp, a good solid end link bracelet, and 20mm of micro adjust in 2mm increments make this watch amazing. The head of the watch massively outclassed the original oyster style non-tapered 22mm hollow end linked pressed clasp bracelet. As a side note, I do actually like a well executed press clasp. I do prefer that to a poorly executed milled clasp. When trying to source a good bracelet for these watches, I would recommend Strapcode, Uncle Straps, formerly known as Uncle Seiko, or contact Mark Frinkle at Long Island Watches. They all supply really good quality, good value, if not cheap, bracelets for these watches. And that brings me on to the other case change. The SRPD53 has the lug holes drilled in a slightly different position to the original SKX. So contrary to popular belief, the SKX bracelets don't fit this watch, and many, including myself, have been caught out by this. All thankfully sorted now, and I'm sure you'll agree the results are absolutely stunning. Now next year, 2026, is the 30th anniversary of the launch of the SKX, and that rare convergence that happened with the 7S26 launch, and Seiko's involvement in the ISO 6425 dive certification programme. So what will Seiko come up with to commemorate the creation of one of the most popular dive watches of all time? Time will tell, it always does. Let's just hope they don't make a willard of it. Please subscribe for more content like this, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Consider a like, and thank you for watching. And remember, watch collecting, it isn't always logical, but it is horological.